Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today what we are going to be going over is my updated 2020 presidential prediction. So the current election happening on November 3rd is going to occur, I believe, in 12 days. It's very close. Is it 12 days? Yeah, it is 12 days. So yeah, if you haven't voted already, I would highly encourage you to get out and vote. This is a very monumental election, and just based off of current numbers that we are seeing out of current states like Texas and Florida have already massively been voting in huge margins, either by mail or early in-person numbers. They have just been absolutely crazy. So looking at the many different states, it's pretty easy to see that Joe Biden right now is currently favored to win the presidency. You can see that through 538, the Washington Post, The Economist, and just recent polls. You can generally see that Joe Biden is favored to win. Even in Republican-leaning pollsters, a lot of them have Joe Biden even with slightly narrow leads in a lot of these states. On the presidential level, Joe Biden's expected to win by a big margin. By state polls, they're a little closer, which is to be expected because it is the Electoral College. And then for the House polls, or like the district polls, they are basically showing a monumental, like landslide election for the Democrats. So, and comparatively to the Senate, the Democrats are doing pretty well in the Senate, probably on par with the presidential level kind of voting. So, looking into the state-by-state predictions, there are a lot of safe states. Again, Oregon actually I think is going to be safe between 15 and 20 points in my opinion. Colorado and New Mexico are pretty difficult to kind of predict whether or not they're going to be safe or likely. I have a feeling that they're actually both going to be safe. New Mexico, I think, would be closer than Colorado, which may be a little weird, but due to recent polling and Trump actually having a previous focus in the state of New Mexico, Trump has actually had a bit of a drought when it comes to money and spending it in ads. It's going to be pretty difficult for him to actually try to break up the numbers in the last couple of weeks. However, I still do think Colorado and New Mexico are safe states. In addition to that, there's going to be a lot of the normal states. States like Connecticut and Jersey and Delaware that were likely margins back in 2016 are no longer going to be likely margins. Along with Hawaii and along with Maine's 1st congressional district, I think that's going to be safe. And I believe that's all the safe states for now. Now we're going to look at the safe Republican states. So there actually aren't as many. There was a recent West Virginia poll that has come out. As we get closer and closer to Election Day, there's been tons and tons of polls that have recently come out, and Joe Biden's actually doing so far, according to polling, trust it as you will. But Joe Biden's definitely been racking up the margins in the state of West Virginia. He has it within about 20 to 30 points, and West Virginia was a state that I believe went to Donald Trump by the biggest margin back in 2016. So it does show that, Joe Biden is leading not only nationwide, but he's starting to break up in the state polls as well. Even though state polls generally have been favoring Trump a bit more comparatively to the national level, it is pretty interesting to see. Along with Nebraska's first. So yeah, Nebraska's first is very solidly Republican. I think Nebraska at large. Oh, not Nebraska's first. Nebraska's third. When it comes to Nebraska at large, I think again this is going to be very teetering between the 14 to 16 point range. I have a feeling though it's still going to remain solidly Republican at the end of the day. The state of Indiana is also pretty close. I'm just gonna not get to that right now. And yeah, now we're going to go on to the likely Democratic states. So I think that the state of Nevada is going to be pretty solidly for the Democrats. Current polling has Joe Biden actually up, and Donald Trump was up previously in 2016. Hillary Clinton won it by a couple of points. This is in most elections, Nevada is typically overestimating Republicans in polls, and I think that this election is no exception, and no rhyme intended in that, but yeah, I think Nevada is probably going to go to Joe Biden by a little over 5 points, maybe even close to 10 on his best day. We're also going to put Minnesota as the likely characterization. I think that with Trump actually not having a super substantial debate victory, a lot of people are kind of divided in whether or not they are saying that Trump or Biden won. But I think that divide is kind of not really good for either candidate. None of them really had a super decisive victory over the other, especially if they're both calling it as it is. I mean, I think that people who are supporting Biden think he did good at the debate. People who are supporting Trump think Trump did good at the debate. But yeah. In addition to that, I think that Michigan is also going to be a likely state. Very close, though. I think it's definitely teetering on that 5-point margin, but I think that despite the fact that some Republican pollsters have Michigan pretty close, or even with a Trump lead or a John James lead in the case of the Senate, I think that Michigan is going to go to Joe Biden by narrowly over 5 points. In addition to that, I didn't even talk about Virginia yet. Virginia is a state that pretty close to a safe margin. Joe Biden is 100% going to outperform Hillary Clinton, especially considering the 2018 midterms, where I believe they flipped 3 House seats in the state of Virginia. They potentially might even flip an additional one in 2020 as well. So that's pretty interesting. And, the state of Virginia trending more and more blue. I would be absolutely surprised if Trump were to win it, because I just don't see him winning it at this point. I think he could have won it back in 2016 if he actually made a play for the state. But personally, I think that Virginia is going to go to Joe Biden by over 10 points. Next up, we're going to go to the state of New Hampshire. So New Hampshire is a state that I previously thought that Trump could actually win. Trump, I think that he definitely has an appeal to this Midwestern area. I think that they do respond to populism and independent thinkers a lot more than, typical politicians. But generally, I think that, due to my current polls, having Joe Biden up by substantial leads, and with Jeanne Shaheen, the Democratic senator there running for re-election, she's up by over double digits, and that's by a numerous amount of pollsters. So generally, I think that Jeanne Shaheen might help push Biden over the edge and could potentially lead Biden to winning by almost 10 points, similar to Barack Obama in 2008, which is pretty noticeable, especially for an election previously considered to be in the bag for President Trump. Next up, what we are going to look at for the likely states. Actually, there aren't any. Well, Maine at large, I think, is going to be a likely area. It's not a district or anything, but I think Maine at large, I think the 2nd district is going to bring it down from a safe margin, but again, teetering on the 15-point margin. Now we're going to go on to the likely Republican states. There are quite a few, actually. I think Montana is going to be likely Republican. There's going to be a lot of ticket splitting, in my opinion, especially considering the fact that they have a competitive House race, a competitive governor's race, and a competitive Senate race there. So I do think that the presidential margin is going to be the biggest for the Republicans. However, anything can still change. Utah, I'm actually moving that into the likely characterization. This might seem insane, and some people are definitely going to attack me in the comments for doing this, but generally, I think that there's going to be a huge write-in vote in the state of Utah. I think probably going to be teetering on that 15-point margin. I think that especially with Mitt Romney saying that he did not vote for Trump, not explicitly endorsing Biden, I think Evan McMullin endorsing Biden is also pretty notable. And Utah is generally a, already vote by mail state. They have pretty effective mail voting already. That system's already in place, along with the states of like Colorado and Washington. They'll pretty much have a good system for that already. So I don't think that that's necessarily going to hurt, at least Republicans, in such a significant fact or way. But yeah, I just think it's going to be a little closer than some people are expecting. I also think that Kansas and Missouri, along with Indiana, are going to be, likely characterizations between probably 10 to 15 points. I have a feeling that Indiana is not going to reach below 10. Kansas and Missouri, I could definitely see that happening. Kansas has a competitive Senate race, which definitely could go to the Democrats. So definitely something to look out on election night, especially considering, well, I mean, if Kansas gets under 10 points, you're probably going to see a Biden win nationwide or even in the Electoral College. So that's definitely kind of something to look at on election night. Next up is going to be the state of Mississippi and South Carolina. So personally, I think that South Carolina is more likely to go to Biden comparatively to Mississippi. I think that they will both be under 10 percentage points. And I think that with increased black turnout, even though in some polling has Joe Biden leading, or not Joe Biden, Donald Trump leading by bigger numbers than Hillary Clinton won, by or increasing his margins from 2016 with minority voters, especially black and Latino voters. It's pretty easy to see on how they could, flip. But however, I do think that there is the amount of turnout that's actually going to happen is going to be very different. However, now what we're going to do is we're going to look at, I completely forgot about Nebraska's first district. That's also going to be likely teetering on the 15-point margin, but I think that like 2008, it's going to be a likely characterization. This is also on par with the 538 forecast. Now we're going to look at the lean Democratic states. There's actually quite a few as well. So I think that Wisconsin's going to be lean, along with Pennsylvania. These states, Midwestern states, went for Trump. However, I do see a lot of polling doing pretty well for Joe Biden. I think that it is going to be under 5 points, but over 2. Actually, yeah, definitely over 2. And I see Joe Biden winning it at the end of the night. For Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, I also think it's going to go to Joe Biden. I also think it's going to go to Kara Eastman on the congressional level. I think that she's probably going to defeat Don Bacon there. I also think that Maine's 2nd congressional district, previously I thought this was solidly for Trump, but I think especially with Jared Golden winning by double digits in this district, I think that there is going to be some ticket splitting. However, it is pretty hard for Trump to kind of win back the white working class voters that have definitely swung to Joe Biden, at least that has been shown in the polls. And I definitely think that pollsters have adjusted it for education, especially those without a college degree. And Joe Biden is starting to definitely narrow up the margins with those without a college degree. And that is definitely a huge warning sign for President Trump in these final few weeks. I also think that Arizona and Florida are going to be lean Biden states. That effectively makes him... Did he win before? Yeah. Well, even without these states, Biden would win. But seeing that these states are going to go to Joe Biden by a lean margin is pretty insane. Arizona, I think... You could probably make the case for a blue Arizona than a blue Florida. Mark Kelly is doing pretty well on the Senate level and is probably going to push Joe Biden over the edge. Tucson and Phoenix are definitely huge growing areas. And I typically with areas that are, growing and increasing in population, it brings along a lot of, more Democratic voters. The newer the generation, likely the newer the political generation. And, as you get younger, especially with, Gen Z and millennials, they typically vote for Democrats more than Republicans. The Republicans' base is normally between the 50 to 65-year-old voters, at least for President Trump. They also appeal a lot to elderly voters, which, Arizona does have quite a few. However, Joe Biden's actually leading in them. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the lean Republican states. So, I think there's just 2, which is the states of Texas and Alaska. So Texas, a huge state, I think it's definitely going to get pretty close. Joe Biden, however, I don't think he's going to be able to win. John Cornyn, I think, is going to help push Trump over the edge a little bit. Mildly popular in the state of Texas. There is a kind of a big broiling battle between MJ Hagar and John Cornyn in the Senate level. However, I do think that the Democrats are definitely going to get quite a few flips in the House races, and it's going to be a definitely very interesting state to watch on election night. I think that if Texas goes, then it's just going to be a huge landslide for Joe Biden, and it's not going to be a contested election. I don't think that Trump could really contest the fact that he would lose states like Texas. Along with Texas, would go states like Iowa, Ohio, potentially even South Carolina, Mississippi, and even Alaska, which, the reason that I have Alaska as a lean state, it's pretty hard to pull the state of Alaska, and could easily get pretty close. Current polling has it pretty close. In 2016, they also had it pretty close, but Trump won it by about 14 to 15 points on election day, which is still in a likely margin. I don't know. Alaska is a very difficult state to predict. However, I do think that with the competitive Senate and House race, it's going to make the margin go down a lot. So finally, we're going to go onto the tilt in Democratic states, and then we're going to go into the tilt Republican states. So for tilt Democratic states, I have the state of North Carolina and the state of Ohio. So these are two very different states. North Carolina, or actually not very different. They're primarily composed of moderate voters. North Carolina having quite a heavy African American population comparatively to Ohio. However, Ohio also does have pretty large urban centers where they typically can, decide elections. Ohio, I think it's definitely going to be hard. I think, especially with the eastern part of the state, previously was super solidly blue, and has definitely trended a lot more red in recent years. However, the Columbus area, the Cincinnati area have definitely trended more and more blue, and I think that if Joe Biden is able to improve his margins, which so far it seems like he has, and especially if those congressional districts which encompass those areas go blue, I think Biden's probably going to win there. In the state of North Carolina, I don't think, well, I did not originally think that North Carolina would be this competitive or even this great for Biden. Even Cal Cunningham, the Democratic nominee for Senate there, him being embroiled in this scandal, which could easily tank any campaign, he's still leading in polls, which is pretty insane. And, Roy Cooper, the current governor running for re-election, is also winning by quite a decent margin. So that's pretty interesting to kind of note. And I think that North Carolina is going to very, very narrowly go for Joe Biden. I think Ohio and North Carolina, along with Iowa and Georgia, are going to be the closest races of the night. And from those states, we're going to go into the tilt Republican states. No surprises here. Iowa and Georgia. So Iowa, typically you would characterize that with Ohio. However, I think Iowa has a more Republican identity and may not be able to shift as much as Ohio did. They currently have 3 Democratic representatives in Congress. I still think that they're going to keep those 3 Democratic representatives. I don't think J.D. Scholten is going to win in the 4th district against Feenstra, but I think Iowa's just very, very, very narrowly going to keep its Republican identity. However, I do think Teresa Greenfield is very narrowly favored to win in the Senate race there. In the state of Georgia, I think it's going to be very, very close. However, I don't know. I don't think that the suburbs in Atlanta are going to swing so heavily to Biden comparatively to 2016. I think that Biden's definitely going to need to appeal to more rural areas in order to completely flip the state of Georgia. But I do think it is going to be less than half a percentage point at this moment. It's going to be a very, very contested race. And if Joe Biden's able to, improve his poll numbers by maybe even just 1 point, he's probably going to be able to flip Iowa and Georgia, potentially Texas and Alaska as well. So yeah, this has been my 2020 presidential prediction. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know that this is not the map that some people personally believe in, but if the election were held today, October 23rd, 2020, this is kind of how I think it'll go. So thank you so much. Like and subscribe. Leave suggestions down in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for watching.